Hi guys, how's it going, and welcome to this Albion Online guide for new players where we're going to be talking about solo dungeons. So firstly, we're going to be talking about the different colour zones in Albion and their risk before you head out and start doing the dungeons. If you are already aware of the different colour zones and what it does mean if you die in these areas, whether you lose your gear or keep your gear, then please skip to 2 minutes 15 now. So we're going to start with the blue zones. Blue zones are completely safe zones where other players can't attack you unless they're faction flagged. You're going to know if they're faction flagged by looking at your character bar at the top and checking if you've got a flag of any colour next to your name. As long as you haven't enlisted with any faction, then this is off by default. If you are faction flagged, just click on the flag to channel and remove it if you're wanting to be 100% safe whilst doing your dungeons. And now we're on to yellow zones. Yellow zones are safe, but red flagged up players can kill you, but don't worry too much, you'll only be downed for 3 minutes and you don't actually lose any of your gear or anything from your inventory when you die in this zone unless you are faction flagged. You're just going to lose 10% durability and there's a 10% chance that things in your inventory will be lost. Next up, we are moving on to red zones. So red zones are full loot PvP, meaning if you die in these zones, you'll be dead and you'll lose all of your gear. However, you can only be attacked by players that are flagged up, which is basically turning on hostile mode by clicking where we did earlier to turn off our faction flag. And lastly, we have black zones. Black zones are full loot PvP, meaning just like red zones, if you die in these zones, you'll be dead and you will lose all your gear and respawn at the last city or your set home. The only difference between red and black zones is that all players can attack each other up in the black zone regardless if they're set as hostile or friendly outside of the black zone. Everyone is automatically forced to be hostile in the black zone and anyone can attack anyone. And now that you know all the risks of the different zones, you can now decide where you'd like to do your solo dungeons. And remember, if you are faction flagged in any zone and you get killed by another faction flagged player, you will die and you'll lose all of your gear and everything in your inventory. And now that that's all out of the way, we can jump in to solo dungeons. Solo dungeons spawn everywhere in the Royal Continent and the Black Zone except for inside cities and the home areas. A solo dungeon looks like this, as you can see on the screen here. It is a green portal. The difficulty of the mobs inside the dungeon depend on what tier zone you're in. You can see the zone tiers by opening up your map and seeing that every area has a number between 2 and 8, 2 being the weakest mobs and 8 being the highest. It's important to note that solo dungeons only spawn in T3 or higher zones, and the higher the tier zone that you're in, generally is the better chance of better loot. You'll have a higher bonus loot chance if you do dungeons in black zones or red zones, as you do run the risk of being ganked and killed in these zones, so generally the higher the risk, the higher the reward. Once you find a solo dungeon, you can dismount and click on it to start channeling to get inside. And now that you're inside your solo dungeon, you have 2 choices. You can run straight in and start clearing the dungeon, or you can choose to wait for the portal outside to close so no one else can enter the dungeon after you. Once you enter a solo dungeon, it starts a timer for 60 or 90 seconds depending on the colour of the zone where you're doing them. And after that time, the dungeon portal that you used to come inside will have closed behind you, preventing anyone else from coming in and trying to kill you or steal your dungeon. With blue and yellow zones, you'll have to wait 60 seconds. With red and black zones, you will have to wait for 90 seconds for the portal to close. And I do believe that the timer is reset from when the last person enters the dungeon. So now you'll be going through your solo dungeon, clearing mobs until you get to dungeon bosses that guard chests. Once you kill the bosses, you'll get to open the chest that they're guarding and take the loot. The dungeon can give you green, blue, purple or even gold chests if you're lucky, green being the worst, then blue, purple and gold being the best. So there's generally 1 boss per floor in the dungeon until it ends, and solo dungeons can be anything from 1 to 3 floors deep. You will also come across shrines inside your solo dungeon that can buff you and make you stronger for short periods of time. There are 3 types of shrines that provide you with buffs, each of them lasting for 1 minute. This first shrine makes us reflect 20% of incoming damage back at the mob or person attacking us, and also it restores 2% of our overall HP per second. And the second shrine here gives us 100% damage increase against mobs and 60% movement speed increased. I personally really like this one, as I'm always trying to clear the solo dungeons as fast and efficiently as possible, so this enables us to rush through really fast in the dungeon. And the third one here will give you 40% cooldown reduction for all of your abilities, and it also will restore 4% of your energy per second. All in all, I think solo dungeons can be great if you're online by yourself or chilling in a call with some friends on Discord. You can make some really good silver and fame, but you also can have a bit of a chill gaming session at the same time. The higher tier dungeons you're going to be clearing, the more silver and fame you'll be getting, assuming that you're clearing them fast and efficiently. It's also good to know as well that if you do want to, you can buy solo dungeon maps instead of searching for them in the open world. The enemies inside will be stronger, but the loot chance will also be higher too. You can buy flat tier maps or enchanted maps. As you can see on screen here, there are 4 types of maps per tier. We're going to take T7 maps as an example here, but this works for all tiers of maps. We can buy a T7 map, T7.1, T7.2 or T7.3. The higher the tier of the map we buy, the harder the mobs are to kill, and the better the rewards are from the mobs and the chests inside the solo dungeon. Once you've used a solo map, it will create a solo dungeon for you to complete within a couple of zones of where you used the map. You can see on your map or your mini map where your dungeon is, and you just have to run over to it to enter. As you can see here, it has a little green ring so you know exactly which zone to go through. When you're in the same zone as the map that you used, it will now appear as a little green dungeon on your map like this. You simply just have to head over to it and enter it. Once you're inside the dungeon, you can now click on a mob to double check that you're inside the right map, because there's going to be a buff underneath all of the mobs' names when you click on them, just like you can see here. The only issue with using maps in yellow zone areas like this is if you're near a busy main city, then there is a chance that other people will also jump into the dungeon and start clearing it, and there's not a lot you can do. I'm going to be adding a link to a guide under this video from my friend Swole Benji, and in that he shows a really nice Boltcasters build that will get you clearing solo dungeons super fast in no time. Also, I'm going to be adding a video here where I clear a bunch of T7 flat dungeons in the roads. This will give you a rough idea of what you can make in T7 dungeons in the Black Zone or the Avalonian roads. I find that T7 is a nice tier to clear, as you can smash through them pretty fast with the right build. Thank you so much for watching this introduction to solo dungeons, and if you did enjoy it, please do consider subscribing and leaving a like. Thanks again guys, and have a great evening.